Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. My name is Joshua.
I'm Lucas.
And I'm Eric.
Eric and Lucas are licensed professional counselors, and today we're going to be talking about helping kids deal with their feelings as we're talking to them. And this comes out of a course that we've done called 18 Ways to Talk to Your Kids. It's available on our website and on our app. You can go to the App Store, search Empowering Choices Parenting, and find this course and many more. So make sure that you do that, or go to our website, empoweringchoices.community. But let's get on with today's show, and we're going to talk about our feelings.
We're going to talk about our feelings.
I feel like Mr. Rogers should make an appearance.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was super solid about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It feels like, as we've been discussing, that like this is kind of one of our foundational courses, and interacting with your children about their feelings seems like one of those foundational skills that you would need to have.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's that joke about like you go into the counselor and all they ask you is, how does that make you feel? But like, there's a reason it's a joke, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a variety of people that don't connect with their feelings.
Right.
And so like, see, what does our point here say? Reflect back to them the feelings they're displaying. That's kind of the way that we phrased it in the How to Talk to Your Kids course. But it's helping your children be able to identify that they are having an emotion, what that emotion is called, and then the act of helping them reflect it and identify it helps control that emotion.
Right.
Because they don't inherently and automatically like know what those things are.
Yeah. And it sounds like this is happening at different ways at different age levels as children are developing.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it happens for a teenager, but it also happens for a 1-year-old.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, you know, I'm thinking of my children, right? I have a 3-year-old who is already telling me like, don't tell me that. When you tell me that, that makes me upset. And I'm like, okay, your emotional intelligence is like up here. We are not going to have to like, so she's way past the fundamentals on knowing what her emotions are. And she's already to the point where she's trying to emotionally manipulate me by saying the right things.
Right.
So understanding what her emotions are is important. And then now she's already begun to use them as a weapon.
Nice.
At 3.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye on her.
What Eric, do you think that children need to know about their emotions?
Well, it's not so much what the children need to know. It's about what do parents need to know to be able to help their kids, you know, because adding on to what you said, they're learning how to identify those emotions, they're learning how to process those emotions, and they're learning how to be able to manage those emotions. And a part of being able to say, you know, let's talk about how you're feeling, or it looks like this is how you're feeling, or, you know, any type of a caveat like that helps in any of those 3 different avenues, you know. And so it's important that they know the boundaries and the structures of how they can be able to display those emotions. It's okay for you to be angry. It's not okay for you to take your anger and tear up a room. You know, let's identify how you're feeling, you know, and because that's one of the big things is that a lot of people don't understand what they're feeling inside, and they don't understand how it is fueling their behaviors at any age.
And I think I hear you saying that like to our audience here of like, as the adult, you need to understand this first. And so like there may be those of us in our audience listening to this that are like, maybe I don't do that so good myself as an adult about my own feelings.
And there's going to be that, you know, so you may have to, you know, you may not identify all the feelings that you're feeling, but at the same time, you might be able to say, tell me what you're feeling, you know, to your child, you know, or it looks like you're sad. Or it looks like you're upset, and begin to help them process what they're feeling, while at the same time you're working as an adult to identify what you're feeling, you know. And there's different ways to be able to do that. Counseling is one of those ways that helps to create and develop an awareness of, you know, how am I feeling inside? And it's a perfectly great use of counseling to be able to develop that awareness.
And I suppose like the natural follow-up question to like all of this discussion about feelings is why? Why does it matter? Why should a child be able to identify their feelings? Don't they just need to like stop yelling, right? Like just stop yelling. Like why are we talking about this feeling stuff, right? They just need to obey. They need to follow the rules. Why is this important?
Why are you yelling? If you're at a sports event, you could be yelling because your team is scoring. Or you could be yelling because the other team is scoring. It's two different types of emotionally powered yelling. I've heard from, adults, spouses, my spouse comes home and they're just in a bad mood. They're just cranky. They're being irritable. They're going, along the weekend. They're just, taking it out on everyone. And, sometimes it takes through the weekend to be able to get out of them. They had a bad day at work. So a bad day at work churned up a bunch of emotions that as they're at home trying to process those, we're assuming process, but you're just carrying them.
I was going to say they might not be processing them, but maybe they're expressing them and venting them. And
exactly, because they're, like a bucket that is full of water, those emotions are going to slosh out.
If it's over full.
If it's over full, if you're going downhill with that bucket, if you're going uphill with that bucket, there's so many different things in the terrain that could make it slosh out. And so not knowing your emotions, they're going to slosh out on the people and the environment around you. And that's why it's important to be able to go, okay, how am I feeling about what happened? My boss embarrassed me. My coworker stole the limelight of the ideas that I had. I just got passed over for a promotion that I was promised. Now, how does that make me feel? And because the feelings are already there. And that's the part that a lot of us don't understand, is that feelings are there. They're a part of what helps us engage, enjoy, process life. So when something happens, well, there are no Vulcans. So if the baseball comes through the window behind you, or a rock, or anything else,
or that tree down there,
that came down last night, you're going to have emotions about the situation that just happened.
I'm sure you, as well as I, have heard our clients who would say, well, that's just inconvenient. Can we just not have that happen? Can the emotions just not be a problem like the way that they are?
Yeah, and that's where I say there's no such thing as a Vulcan.
Right. It just is the way it is.
And if you understand the reference of a Vulcan, it's not that they don't have emotions, but they have worked on how to be able to suppress, control them to such a degree that it does not influence their lives in the way that it would for a human being. But they're still there. And if you're a Star Trek fan, that Vulcans get into places where those, all of that self-control they have, they lose it, and then they lose it, and they look just as human as the human, only with 3 times the strength, which never goes well for the human. And so it's, there's no such thing as you can't have these. They're there.
So maybe like if we're going to use like a different analogy of like, well, why do I have to brush my teeth? Well, because like your teeth would like get dirty and then they would hurt and then they would get cavities if you didn't. Why do I have to address my emotions? Well, because they're there. And if you don't, they're going to give you like stomach ulcers. You're going to lash out at your kids, or so it's just a part of the world. And we want you need to understand it because it's there. And the better you can understand it, the better you can talk to your kids.
Well,
you see what I did there? All the way right back around, full circle.
You also put it into the terms of you're going to get ulcers. You forgot to say you may also give other people ulcers.
Oh, sure. No, those were just very limited examples of all the things that could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the emotions are there, and you can, if we think of emotions as something that has control of you, or something you are gaining control of. And the more that you build your awareness, the more that you're able to identify what's going on for you, then the more and the quicker you can be the one in control of your emotions. It's very common to hear people say, you made me feel.
Yep.
Well, the thing is, those are your chemicals.
Right. That's a factually inaccurate statement.
Correct. Now, if someone, it doesn't mean that people don't intentionally go after other people to cause certain types of emotions. Yesterday, we were trying to get a parking place to go into a restaurant, and we're waiting for someone to pull out. And, they're getting into the car, they're adjusting things. You know how this goes in a mall. It's just not a quick process. The person behind us is honking. And my wife is like, they're honking at us. And I'm like,
that's accurate.
Okay. And she's like, well, what should we do? It's their turn to wait. And so we just sat there, and the person pulled out, and then we pulled in, and my wife was like, I wonder if they just wanted by. And I'm like, no. What they wanted to do is make us feel bad for being in front of them, and then we would move, and then they would take the parking place.
And then they would take the parking spot that you'd been waiting for.
And she said, well, how would you know that? And I said, let's watch. And there was another car that pulled out just ahead of us, and they pulled right into that place.
They were looking for a parking spot
They wanted a parking place, but they wanted to use their horn as a way of manipulating how we felt being behind them and inconveniencing them. And so it's people will try and affect your emotions to manipulate you, but it's also on us as to what we're going to do at that moment.
It is not a reality that because someone does something, you must feel a certain way about it.
Right.
There's common realities of like someone honks their horn at you, you likely get angry at them or something. But it's not a requirement. You weren't getting angry at them. You were simply analyzing the situation and going, yeah, no.
Yeah, I get why you're honking. It's not going to work.
Right. It was not a automatic, like you didn't get angry automatically because they honked. Like it wasn't.
Right. My thought is, you know what? I have waited for, parking places before behind other people who were there first, which in Western civilization, first come, first serve is a big part of our society. So I took my turns at waiting. Now it's your turn.
So I've got a question. When talking to kids, and I'm a fix-it guy, so I want to,
that's not always the proper approach for emotions.
I want to fix things. So I had to learn with my wife that she doesn't always want me to say, well, I would just do A, B, and C, redirect, blah, 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 to listen and to go through the whole thing. So with a kid, where is the balance in between, hey, that's really sad that you failed that test and you feel like, you're a failure and you never want to go back to school again and blah, 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 versus how long do you let them sit in that versus say like, well, hey, if you're upset about that, let's come up with some strategies or some ways so that next time you can do better or you can come out on top. How do you figure out that balance? Because I just want to go straight to the, like, let's fix it.
Right. Stop crying. Let's call your teacher up and see when you can retake that test.
Right.
First question, who are you talking to? Are you talking to a girl or a boy? That's going to be a part of the foundation because boys and girls are different.
Right.
You said, I'm a fix-it guy. All guys are fix-it guys.
Right. That's fairly inherent in the, the species over here.
If you go into, the second trimester, boys got massive testosterone baths that severed 1/3 of the neural network. Yes, I know people are going to go with that wherever they want to. But it made us with a different neural network. We're single-focused, problem-solving, conquer-minded. There's your fix-it. Now, when guys bring up problems, it means we've already processed it in our own minds, and we're bringing it up to someone that we trust to begin to give us other solutions, other perspectives, other ideas. Okay. See, this is where the fix-it part is okay. Yeah. When guys offer that up. When girls offer that up, no.
No.
Because to them, it says, you don't think I can solve the problem. And they don't understand why we do that. And then when I explain this is why they do that, they go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think like that. Yes, I know that, you didn't get that testosterone bath. Okay, so boy, girl, you're looking at, okay, if it's a girl, let me focus a little more on, wow, that really sucks. Wow, that has to be hard. And you don't want to go back to school anymore. You are really having a hard time with this. that. And so you kind of look in there, you help them to be able to express their emotions, because for a girl, for a woman, being able to talk about emotions is one of the number one way that they vent emotions.
And are we talking like 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days?
Oh, you want a science. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's relationship. You're going to be in that with the person, and you're going to be taking that cue from that person and being able to determine, because girls, women will splinter talk. That means that they'll talk about the emotions in a different situation, the emotions in a different situation, the emotions in a different situation, because it's a venting process that can come all the way back. Sometimes it doesn't, to the original problem. But when they're done, a lot of emotions have been vented out. Now they can go solve their problem. You see? And so that's where the fix-it world has to be on hold. Now, if the person then presents with different types of, I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't know how to handle this, you might be able to say, I had a couple of ideas. Do you want to hear those?
Yeah.
Or, and then it's up to that person to go, you know what, I don't think I can hear those right now. Or, yeah, let's talk about that. Versus a boy, where you may be able to go into the emotions and how it feels a little bit, and then talk about, okay, what, more open-ended questions. How did you approach this test? Well, I crammed for it last night. Well, how much time did you spend cramming for it? About 15 minutes. Oh, okay, that sounds like it wasn't enough. What do you think? And I can see why you're feeling that, this really sucks. This is going to impact your grade. Is there any correlation between, so you're asking some open-ended questions that still aren't fixing it, but are kind of leading towards, okay, what do you think about this situation?
Yeah.
And that too can lead to, okay, have you, later on they might say, you know what, I really have been needing to do a different type of studying. Do you want to talk about that? I've got some ideas. I know some things that helped me, when I was your age.
And I think the thing that you're leaning into, and you had said there at one point, Eric, of like, when do you listen to their emotions? When do you help solve the problem? Well, it depends on your kid. Yep. Right? It depends on how old they are. And it depends on how they solve
your
problems.
Your relationship with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was what I was going to lean
know
into.
Them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, so when do you do that? It's like, well, you need to know them well enough to know what cues they're putting off. And like, there's one of the elements from Daniel Siegel's book, The Whole Brain Child. And he talks about, you have to have the emotions calm enough for the logical brain to be turning on. And that's kind of the two things that you were talking about when do I stop calming the emotions and talk about the logical thing?
Right.
When the emotions are calm enough for the logical brain to be able to function.
Got it.
And how are you going to know that's true? Well, their body language and how they're positioning themselves and what their face is telling you. All of those things that are based on the relationship.
70% of communication that's nonverbal. I think we talk about that somewhere.
Well, right. What is it? The nonverbal parts are the body language, the things you can see, and then the tone of voice, the how the words are being said are absolutely more impactful than the words themselves on the message.
Which means the messages that they're giving out. Right. And so it's you're learning how to read your child. You're learning how to be able to sit with them in the conversation, based on who you know them to be, and that's the other thing is that, even with the gender pieces that we talked about, you're going to have different slices of girls and boys. So some boys are going to be more with emotional processing, and some girls are going to be more with logical, let's get to some answers. That will really help me process. You have to put the work in, which is why you have the games, you have the activities, you have the coloring, you're playing with them, which is the reason that playing with them is so important is that it helps you get to know them, how they think, how they process, how they act, who they are, because you're going to see these things well before they are. They're going to be looking to you for these things to reflect off of you to be able to understand and solidify for themselves, this is me.
That's why the foundational skill before how to talk to your kid is the spend time with your kid and have a relationship with them. Like this skill builds on that skill. And so you have to do all of that first. And then I feel like I have to mention, again, one of the things that I remembered from the Daniel Siegel book is if your child is displaying behaviors that look like they're really upset, but you can tell that they're just putting on a show, right, to try to get you to do something. He said you only have one response to that, is you don't negotiate with a terrorist. So that would be like, it looks like they're putting on an emotional, display, but you're like, I can tell based on my relationship with you that you're just doing the things that look like an emotion, but you're really just trying to crank, the yes to a no or a vice versa. So again, foundationally, know your kid well enough to know, what do all those nonverbals mean?
Right. And it sounds like, you need to have that relationship and know your kid well. And you also have to understand yourself and where you're coming from so that you can know where your tendencies lie. So like for me, for instance, if I had a daughter who was 16, I would need to know, okay, I know I want to fix it, but I need to go in there prepared to listen. Or maybe then I approach my son different, knowing that, but kind of you got to take it all into consideration.
Yeah,
that's good.
Terrible hearing this from a bunch of counselors, because we're going to tell you, like, do all of this personal self-improvement work. And I mean, like, there is some truth to that, though.
Yeah. So basically, very important to know your kids, understand their emotions, know what's going on, how to reflect those back. When you're talking to your kid and they are all, riled up and things are just at a high level, that obviously is something that once again looks different for a 16-year-old than a 2-year-old. You were mentioning earlier from that book, letting them sort of calm down and move to the second piece. What does that look like What's the difference? So with a 2 or 3-year-old, I feel like I could detect, like, okay, they've calmed down now. What about take a 16-year-old son who already doesn't like talk a lot about his emotions or show that, and now I've got to gauge, like, okay, are we to the next piece here? How do you detect that in a more complex situation?
So you're also kind of trying to fit this into a science again.
Okay.
You said a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Which means that if you put the time in, you have 16 years of data. How do you know if your 16-year-old is not doing well? You have 16 years of data in just being around them. So what do they do when they're upset? What do they do when they're hurt? Because whether it's introvert or extrovert, there are certain and specific things that each of those categories do to be able to soothe themselves, use coping skills, and process. And if you're seeing that 16-year-old doing something that you haven't seen before, then it's a good indication, hey, let's come closer. Let's find out what's going on in the world, what's going on in the environment, what's going on at school. Even if they're not talking to you, you can still be around more to see if you can catch something coming out. Secondhand comments are really good places to get, information that can lead you in the direction, that you need to go. Those can be good indicators at those times, if they're pulling away more of, hey, let's go do something, something that they really like to do, something that will draw them out so that there's more connection with you. So you're using that relationship, and it's a little different for a boy and a girl. Bedtime, an hour before bedtime for girls, for women is where they like to talk and process their day. It's a very tender hour across the board, and so that can be a time that you approach that person in. So you're looking for those natural places. For a boy, we process our emotions a lot through our hands. So getting them involved in some kind of an activity that takes the hands and something they enjoy, those are some pieces. But I'm going to go back to, you have 16 years of data. What does it mean if you generally see your child do certain things? What have you noticed over the years? Because that's where the whole get to know your kid is very key.
It's when the heavy metal music coming from their room switches to soft rock.
Yeah.
That's how you know you can approach them.
Or the classical switches to heavy metal, which is where you need to approach them.
Right.
Maybe, depending on
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
It's all about being in their life and then collecting that data overall.
Right.
I think the thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to train a mechanic and give them a bunch of tools and give them a bunch of, well, maybe this is how you go about it.
Right.
And then that mechanic, parent in this analogy, right, then goes out to a shop and goes, okay, what's coming in today?
Yeah.
Right. We've got a Toyota sedan with a squeaking noise in the
Right.
front left wheel versus, a BMW that's got smoke pouring out of the engine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, what do you do in that case? Well, you use your set of tools, you analyze the situation in front of you, and you do your best to understand what those symptoms mean and use the tools you have to try to address that problem.
Right.
And then if your teenager's smoking, well, are they smoking out of the ears or are they smoking out of the little white paper thing between their two fingers? Right.
Right.
That's two different scenarios.
Two different things to figure out. And I think that's what is great about this course and our other courses is there's so much information there, and it doesn't just, I'm giving some specific scenarios that I'm asking about, but really regardless of the age of your kids or regardless of all your family dynamics, we really try to cover sort of all of those things and make sure that there's a toolkit that can be used. So this lesson, the things that we're talking about today are just part of our 18 ways to talk to your kids. It's like a 4 or 5 part series that you can find in our subscription website at empoweringchoices.community or by downloading the app. And then we have a lot more material and courses and different things that you can go through, but all geared around becoming a better parent and ways that you can communicate with your child. So we'll see you on our next episode.